So what if
Mm.
we talk about the impact of sensory overload on communication itself? Because
Oh,
let's face it, we're dealing with a social communication disorder.
that's a huge topic.
That's a huge topic. So talk to us about being sensory overloaded and how it affects communication.
I think it affects every area of it because it brings you down to the lowest level of being able to communicate. So even then, you're not even quite sure of what your needs are, and your sense of interoception is very stunted when you're at that point. And if for those of you that don't know, that sense of interoception is really your ability to feel hunger, to have to urinate or defecate, all of those basic things that we take for granted that our bodies just do automatically. And when you're in sensory overload, your body can't process any of that. So you're at a point where not only could those things potentially happen, but you also feel the shame and guilt of not being able to process through, and you remember it afterwards. My gosh, you go through that experience and you remember, oh my gosh, I did this when I felt that way and I feel terrible about it. So now I need to go through the justifying process of it all. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is it usually leads itself to another incident if you don't have interventions that are customized and going to work for that individual.
So social engagement, which is the precursor to communication, right? The act of engaging, we talk about handover, takeover, helping the parents place the child in the front line, giving the student the ability to be more on the front line in a safe environment, because these behaviors become very conditioned. So even when they can begin to do it, they've learned not to do it, so they don't. And so it takes, I say, don't wait, facilitate. It takes the parent, it takes the educator to facilitate the next steps and the state and the interventions. And so those acts of social engagement may be impaired when these children are not able to process. They're dysregulated, they're shut down. So the act of communication, not even nonverbal, they can't even engage.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it,
So why aren't they talking, Dr. B?
yeah.
So they're not even engaging. They're not able to hand take. They're literally sitting there like unable to do something, or they're so dysregulated, they're all over the place. But for our population, I would say the majority are more shut down,
Mm-hmm,
especially
mm-hmm.
younger children, because older children begin to kind of live in their avoidance. So they know what they can and can't do. So they don't even look anxious, even if sensory was the underlying factor in the beginning years. If they grow into their sensory system, some of
Mm-hmm.
these kids, and they can do more, but they're so conditioned not to, they don't even know how to have the give, take, back, forth, and they have to learn it.
And usually it builds on itself. So when a situation like that happens, you have one person who's trying to interact, they don't interact. They call, somebody else comes in to try to interact, and you end up with two or three people where the person might have been able to move themselves out of it. Now they absolutely can't. And the next time they have to, the expectation is that much higher. And the stakes are that much higher for them because they didn't do it the last time. So 100% has to be facilitated by the people providing support in that environment to get them to that point. But also those facilitators have to know when to back up enough to let them take more lead so that they can be successful. Because well-meaning, we end up oftentimes starting that facilitation, but then taking over that step. And unfortunately, the person then feels like, I can't do it again. And this is where I'm at this point again. So being able to help them, lead them through that process and be able to back away. I think that's harder for caregivers to do than anything else. Back away.
Absolutely. That whole social buffering and doing for them. I call it the passenger in the car versus the driver in the car. When you're a passenger in the car, you're just kind of going with the flow. You're not even thinking about where you're going, so that when you're on your own, you don't know where to go because you didn't pay attention. You didn't have the opportunity. So we have to help our kids become the drivers and lead and become a more independent, confident social communicator. But when they have these sensory challenges, it's about meeting them where they're at. And I think one of the things parents and teachers will say is, well, I don't know how much to push. I don't know how much to do. And that's where your treatment provider will help guide you. Like, you give them the goals. This is what we're working on. You read their body language. I mean, if they're sitting there, like you said, like straight face, no expression, staring into space, that fear, deer in the headlight look, no, that's not the time. That's more giving them time to acclimate and looking at their environment. And but what happens is when you push too much, you're causing more anxiety and avoidance because you remember what you experience. What's that statement? Fear begets fear. How about some self-regulation strategies? How strategies that the kids can use themselves and the parents can, whether it's meditation, adjusting their environment. You touched on this in the beginning with the light.
And those are much later strategies. Like I always tell when parents are like, well, we'll try to meditate. And I'm like, let's do something really simple first. How about drop something on the floor beside them and have them bend over to pick it up? And they're like, what the heck does that do? And I'm like, well, 80% of your serotonin is made in your gut and you want to help distribute more of it. So pressure on that stomach is going to help that. So doing those little techniques, let's stimulate the vagus nerve a little bit. If they're humming a song, hum along with them, encourage them to hum. If they are rubbing their face a lot, maybe encourage them to put pressure on the front of their head instead. That's going to help significantly. All those really simple strategies, using water, have them hold something that's frozen. Holding something that's frozen signals to your body that it has to relax in order to avoid hypothermia. And so what ends up happening is your body releases a bunch of hormones to help relax the body so that you don't go into hypothermia. So just do an ice cube contest with them for a second. Hold an ice cube and say, oh, how long can we hold it? And try to have a little competition with them for a few seconds with the ice water or something can significantly help. So there's some really simple strategies. And then later strategies, I often say, are like going into meditation or talk therapy with them, those sorts of things, because those can help as well. But they're not at a process usually where they can process language oftentimes when they're dysregulated. So that's not a great place to start when you're trying to work on regulation.